Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. In the previous video, we got two words, GUAM and confront. So today, we are going to make a video out of it. So first of all, let's talk about GUAM. First of all, where is GUAM?
Guam, or Guahan in Chamorro, is an island in the Micronesia sub-region of the Western Pacific Ocean. The island spans 540 square kilometers. It is located in Oceania, and it is the largest and southernmost of the Mariana Islands, and also the largest island in Micronesia. Guam's capital is Hagåtña, and the most populous city is Dededo. It is also an organized unincorporated territory of the United States, and it is also the westernmost point and territory of the United States.
Because of this, the residents of Guam are American citizens by birth. As of 2020, Guam's population was almost 170,000. The indigenous Guamanians are the Chamorros, who are related to the Austronesian peoples of Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Taiwan, Micronesia, Polynesia, among others. And the Chamorros form the largest ethnic group on the island, but they still form a minority on the multi-ethnic island. So now, let's see the word confront. What does confront actually mean, and what is the context in today's video?
According to the internet, confront means to come face to face with someone with hostile or argumentative intent. So for the context of today's video, we are going to talk about confrontations or wars, specifically confrontations and wars that had happened in Guam.
So to understand about confrontations or war in the context of today's video, let's look at some Guam history. The indigenous Chamorros settled the island approximately 4,000 years ago, until in March of 6th, 1521, the Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, while in the service of Spain, was the first European to visit the island. Guam was eventually colonized by Spain in 1668, and between the 16th and 18th century, Guam was an important stopover for Spanish Manila galleons traveling from Manila in the Philippines to Acapulco in Mexico. So now, let's go to the part of wars that happened in Guam. The first major war that involved Guam was the Spanish-American War. The Spanish-American War was an armed conflict between Spain and the United States of America in 1898. Hostilities began in the aftermath of the internal explosion of USS Maine, a US ship in Havana Harbor in Cuba, leading to US intervention in the Cuban War of Independence. This war led to the Americans emerging predominant in the Caribbean region, and more importantly, it resulted in the American acquisition of Spain's Pacific possessions. So during this war, the United States captured Guam on June 21st, 1898. After almost 4 centuries as part of the Kingdom of Spain, the United States occupied the island in the event known as the capture of Guam. The capture of Guam was a bloodless engagement between the United States and Spain during the Spanish-American War. The capture of Guam went like this. It is a pretty interesting story. On the June 20th, 1898, an American fleet commanded by Captain Henry Glass consisted of a protected cruiser named USS Charleston and 3 transports carrying troops to the Philippines. They entered Guam's upper harbor, Captain Glass having received orders to proceed to Guam and capture it. Charleston fired a few rounds at Fort Santa Cruz without receiving return fire, so 2 local Spanish officials, not knowing that war had been declared and believing that the firing had been a salute, came out to Charleston to apologize for the inability to return the salute because of the lack of gunpowder. Glass informed them that the US and Spain were at war. So the following day, Glass sent their lieutenant to meet the Spanish governor to arrange the surrender of the island and subsequently capture the island. Because the Spanish garrison on the island had no prior knowledge of the war, they had no real ability to resist the American forces. Eventually, they surrendered without resistance, and the island passed into American control. As a result, some 54 Spanish infantry were captured and transported to the Philippines as prisoners of war. This event was the only conflict of the Spanish-American War that happened on Guam. So following Spain's defeat in the Spanish-American War, it resulted in the Treaty of Paris of 1898. So the 1898 Treaty of Paris was a treaty signed by Spain and the United States on December 10th, 1898 that ended the Spanish-American War following Spain's defeat. It was negotiated on terms which was favorable to the US, which allowed it temporary control of Cuba and ceded the ownership of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippine Islands to the United States. As a result, the United States gained Spain's colonies of Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico in the treaty, and Cuba became a US protectorate. So Guam was transferred to the United States Navy control on December 20th, 1898 by the Executive Order 108A from the 25th President William McKinley. Under the Treaty of Paris, signed December 10th, 1898, Spain officially ceded Guam to the US effective of April 1899. Fast forward 40 years later and the Second World War happened, specifically the Pacific War. So the Pacific War was part of the Second World War. It was a theater of the World War that was fought in Asia, the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, and Oceania. It was geographically the largest theater of the war, including the vast territories of the Pacific Ocean and also the Southwest Pacific. It is widely accepted that the Pacific War itself began on 7th or 8th December of 1941, depending on where you are, when the Japanese invaded Thailand and attacked British colonies of Malaya, Singapore, Hong Kong, as well as United States bases in Hawaii, Wake Island, Philippines, and Guam. So what did the Japanese do to Guam during this war? Following prolonged tensions between Japan and the Western powers, units of the Imperial Japanese Army and the Imperial Japanese Navy launched simultaneous surprise attacks on the British Empire and the United States on the 7th of December or the 8th of December if you were in Asia at the time. So the locations of this first wave of Japanese attacks included the British territories of Malaya, Singapore, Hong Kong, and also the American territories of Hawaii, Philippines, Wake Island, and Guam. So the Japanese attack on Guam resulted in the First Battle of Guam. So on December of 8, 1941, hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Guam was attacked, invaded, and captured by the Japanese. The First Battle of Guam took place from 8 December to 10 December 1941 on Guam between Japan and the United States. The American garrison at the time was defeated by Japanese forces on 10th of December, which resulted in Japanese occupation. They occupied the island for 2.5 years, and the Japanese renamed Guam, which means Great Shrine Island. During the occupation, Guamanians were subject to forced labor, incarceration, torture, and execution, family separation, incarceration, concentration camps, and forced prostitution. Approximately 1,000 people died during the occupation, according to later Congressional Committee testimony in 2004. Some historians estimate that war violence killed 10% of Guam's then 20,000 population. The Japanese occupation of Guam lasted for approximately 31 months until the Second Battle of Guam in 1944. So the Second Battle of Guam happened on the 21st of July until the 10th of August 1944, was the American recapture of the Japanese-held island of Guam, captured by the Japanese back in 1941. So the US returned and fought the Battle of Guam from July 21st until August 10th, 1944 to recapture the island from the Japanese. More than 18,000 Japanese were killed and only 485 surrendered. The United States also captured and occupied the nearby Northern Mariana Islands. From that moment on, Guam remained under the United States ever since. What is the legacy that we can see today from the wars that have happened in Guam? In the present time, in Guam, July 21st is commemorated as Liberation Day to remember the day when the American forces recaptured the islands on July 21st, 1944 from the Japanese. Also, since the 1960s, Guam's economy had been supported primarily by tourism and the US military, for which Guam is a major strategic asset. Because Guam is a major strategic asset for the United States in the Pacific, there are many US military bases on the island. The US military maintains jurisdiction over its bases, which cover approximately 29% of the island's total land area. These military bases include the US Naval Base of Guam of the US Navy, the US Coast Guard sector of Guam, the Anderson Air Force Base, which was previously known as Northfield and was established in 1944 and was renamed for Brigadier General James Roy Anderson of the old US Air Forces as the Anderson Air Force Base. Other than that, there is also the Upper Harbor, the Ordnance Annex of the US Navy, Naval Computer and Telecommunication Stations of the US Navy, and Joint Force Headquarters of Guam of the Guam National Guard. The presence of the military community has been interconnected with villagers' lives in many ways. Many villagers serve in the military or are retired. Many active duty personnel and Defense Department civilians also live in villages outside of the military installation areas. The military and village communities have adoption programs where Guam's population and the military personnel stationed on Guam perform community service projects together. Other than that, there is also memorial parks in Guam, such as the War in the Pacific National Historical Park at Asan. It is quite a nice place if you ask me. That is all for today's video.
Now let's look at the topic for next week's video. What random country will we get? We got Georgia. Okay, let's look what word we will get. We got crown. So the topic for next video will be Georgia and crown.
So for the next video, let's hope we can make a great video out of it. And if you are from Georgia, do reach me out. If you know things about crowns, do reach me out. And if you do know about the topic for next video, do reach me out as well. That's all for today. If you like the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And even if you don't like it, do the same as well. Thank you. See you next time.